There we go. Now we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Spencer Uncensored. This is episode 79. And before I tell you where I am right now, I'm trusting that you can hear me okay. Lots of wind. And so I had to position my Jeep in this position and then hook the whole camera setting over here so you guys can, hopefully the wind is not going to be a big issue with these headphones. But before I tell you where I am, this is episode 79. 79. That means we've had 78 other episodes where we got together, talked about business, talked about unshakable secrets, and worked on boosting your momentum and building mastery. That's what we do. My name is Spencer Combs, and I believe that professional development always comes on the heels of personal development. So, thanks for being here tonight. I see Dan's in the house. What's up, dude? I'm assuming you can hear me okay. If you don't mind dropping that in the comments so I can make sure that my audio is okay, because I am out in the middle of a wilderness area. It's not wilderness, really. There's a pretty good sized highway on the other side of my Jeep. Right over there. All right, well, I'm going to assume that you guys can hear me and the sound is okay. So tonight, we're going to cover two topics. One from the momentum framework, more specifically referred to as the drift to drive framework. And then I'm going to also, we're going to talk about another topic that comes out of the mastery framework, right? The mastery framework, otherwise known as the qualified champions framework. And those two topics are inspired because today, and for a couple of days, I've actually been in Savannah, Georgia. And if you don't know where Savannah is, it's at the if you follow the border of South Carolina and Georgia all the way down to the coast, it's right there at the top. What's happening, John? I see John's in the house. Good to see you. So the Savannah River actually cuts South Carolina and Georgia from each other. That's their border line. And Savannah's there at the bottom. Now, some of that geography is going to matter in this conversation tonight, but I want to, a couple of things that just came to my mind and I wanted to share with you because I think there's some lessons to be had. Now, let me say this, and I will eventually tell you more about where I am, okay? All this behind me, and specifically, you can't really see it, but it's like right around in here. There's something there. We're going to talk about that and a little story behind it, and then how we can apply that to our own business, okay? But before I do that, let me tell you, I was riding around with my youngest daughter, and I said, what should I talk about tonight? What do you think the business leaders that are going to come on there, what do you think they want to hear about tonight? And she said, well, why don't you talk about how when you're in different places that you think different? And I said, well, you know, there's a whole section about that in the Momentum and Mastery book. When we talk about drift to drive, the first step we tell everyone to do is start dreaming. Guys, if you're not doing that from time to time and physically taking yourself in a position where you can go dream, just putting yourself in a position where you're around people or around things that are at a higher level of lifestyle or a different level, maybe not even higher, just different level of lifestyle, you're missing out on getting your brain to think and act differently because it won't know another way unless you expose it. And experiences are going to be way more powerful than just telling yourself or reading about it or hearing it even on a friggin' video like this. So you have to have some level of experience around it, and just exposing yourself to different lifestyles will help move the creative juices in your mind. I'm trusting that makes sense to you. I know that when I'm riding around in a totally different town and I'm looking at different things, I get a different sense about what's possible or what other people enjoy. Would I possibly enjoy that? Is that a part of the lifestyle that I want to have, right? So that allows me to expand the possibilities in my own mind. You'll never really get into any level of momentum unless you can first get a sense for a bigger, a life of higher achievement, a life of more fulfillment. You're never going to get there unless you can give yourself some level of idea that it's even possible. Probability won't happen until we first mentally get a sense that it's a possibility. We go from possibility to probability. So we got to get the possibility going. We got to get inspired. I trust that was useful for you. If you haven't done any dreaming recently, go walk around a high dollar neighborhood. Go look at some high dollar cars. I still browse and look at friggin' Aston Martins because that's what I want. And someday I will have one, right? It's just not in the cards for me today. So I know I'm standing out here doing these little videos and people are like driving by like, "Is this guy talking to his door?" No, I'm not talking to the door. I got the phone over here set up and ready to go for us to have this conversation because that's what we do at Spencer Uncensored. Whatever the we want. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about where I am right now. And I really wanted to like take the camera and like walk around, but I'm telling you, if I get from behind, matter of fact, pay attention. If I get from behind the Jeep, the wind is so heavy, you guys would just hear nothing but wind noise. And I'm assuming that's not going to work for the two of us tonight. Me, you, and the 14 or so people, right? We're going to need some, we're going to need a little bit of shielding. So I'm going to have to stay right here for you. Let me tell you what this is right here. I'm going to right around, right there. You can possibly see it. That is a brick structure right there. That brick structure has 11 foot thick walls. It is a place called Fort Pulaski. And you can go look it up. You can read about it more. And I think there's some lessons to be learned. And that's one of the reasons why I love history so much is because you can follow the history lessons and pay attention that, you know, I can have I have a life of better wisdom by following and listening to other people's mistakes, right? Being smart's listening, you know, paying attention to your own mistakes. Being wise is learning from somebody else's mistakes. Well, I'm dropping all kinds of stuff tonight, y'all. I'm preaching. So listen, this is Fort Pulaski. Fort Pulaski was built just shortly after the War of 1812. The reason why they needed to build it, because in the War of 1812, the British actually got all the way to Washington, D.C., up the Potomac, because there was no fortification on the river. And so they went through and they did an entire restructuring of how they wanted to defend the country along the coast. And the mouth of the Savannah River was one of those places that they needed to do it. Another one, by the way, would have been Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter is actually in Charleston Harbor. And that, if that might ring a little bell to you, Fort Sumter is where the first shot of the Civil War was shot, in Charleston Harbor. It's actually sitting in the middle of the harbor. Well, this, Fort Pulaski here, is actually built in the mouth of the Savannah River, meaning you could not pass it or you couldn't go down the river, it couldn't get to the city of Savannah without passing it. And so it was there for fortification to make sure that there was no outside forces coming in and attacking the United States on the Atlantic side. I'm trusting that you guys are historically inclined enough to listen and hear me out for a minute. Well, when they did that, they actually had to build all this ground that's around out there on the other side of the little bridge it was all marsh. So they had to actually make it solid ground before they could build the fort there. There was a lot of little spots, right? They had like a lighthouse out there, but there was not enough, obviously, for this huge fortification. So they had to make all that ground and design all this and set it up. Little known fact, if you're not, just for familiarity, Robert E. Lee, which was the general for the Confederate Army, if you didn't know, he was an engineer. This was actually one of his first assignments when he got out of West Point, was to come here and help build this. So anyway, Fort Pulaski sits at the mouth, and it kept people from being able to get into the city of Savannah without passing by it. Pretty basic. Now, if you look at a map, you'll notice that Tybee Island, which is pretty popular these days, Tybee Island is it's kind of like a tourist area now. During the Civil War, actually, let me back up. So in 1840 something, the fort was finished. It sat here for 16 years with one person manning the whole thing because they didn't need anybody here. We were not fighting anything. Most of our resources were going out in the westward expansion. And so we just had it sitting here. Giant fort. With one dude just making sure it's okay. Well, when the Civil War began and Georgia seceded from the Union, they sent 150 people, a militia, to come and take it. And so they did. They came and took it in 1861. And I'm surprised at how much I remember this off the top of my head. But this is a fun story if you just follow with me for a second. 1861, they came, and the one guy that was here from the Union Army, he's like, I'm out of here, guys. I'm not fighting all of you guys for this big thing. You guys can have it. And so the Confederate Army took this fort and had it in 1861 at the beginning of the Civil War. Now, so they garrisoned it, meaning they put men here, they kept them here, and then the official Confederate Army actually came and took it over from the Georgia militia. And then they thought it was pretty much invincible because it was designed that the only way that you were ever going to be able to penetrate this thing was probably by sea, because the river was going both sides and the land was a little too far out for you to be able to shoot from land and hit these 11-foot walls. And so they were impenetrable in their mind. There was no way. If you got a ship that was within shooting distance to actually hit those, consistently, these walls, you'd probably get shot out of the water anyway by the fort. So there was just no way. Well, the Union Army actually showed up, and what you probably didn't know is that during the Civil War, a new technology showed up. This is where the business lessons start showing up. There was new technology. It was called rifling. Now, we know what rifling is basically when you bore out the barrel of a cannon and or even the rifle, and then you use these longer projectiles, bullets nowadays. They had big ones, right, for the cannons. They could shoot further and they could shoot faster and with way more accuracy because of rifling. Now, it had never been used before in actual war. It had been tested over in Europe, but it had never been actually used in war. And so the Union Army, when they set up shop on Tybee Island, which is about 1.25 miles away, in the night, they would do all this stuff, and for several weeks, they were getting themselves set up. Now, the Confederates knew that they were over there, but they didn't realize what they were doing in setting up all this artillery. The Union general sent a letter and said to Colonel Olmsted over here and said, "Hey, buddy, do you want to give up your fort?" He's like, "No, I think we're good. I don't even know what you're trying to do, but no, we're not giving up the fort." Actually, the way he said it was, I'm responsible for defending it, not giving it up. Right? It's a much more honorable way of saying it, I'm sure. I don't remember, but he said, I'm not here to give it up. I'm here to defend it. And so I said, "Okay, have it your way." The next morning, and for 30 hours straight, the Union Army bombarded this thing and kept hitting this specific side of the fort, which they didn't think would happen. And eventually, they still weren't going to give up. But what did happen was they managed to penetrate through, and then one of the munitions went really, really close to where they kept their powder magazine. It was 40,000 pounds. 40,000 pounds. Guys, there's business story in this, guys, a lesson in this. Just hold on. 40,000 pounds of gunpowder in the opposite corner. So they managed to get some and explode very close to that. And that was when Colonel Olmsted, who was running this for the Confederate Army, said, "You know what? If they actually can hit that," which they got real close this last time, "it's going to blow up the entire fort and every man in it." So they ran up the white flag. The Union Army came over here, took it, took all the Confederates. They actually shipped them to New York as prisoners of war. And then the Union Army actually had this fort for the duration of the war. Now, a couple of lessons in all of that. Number one, the Confederates were using, they had the technology that was working for them, and it was a very great idea in terms of what they were doing for defense, right? When you think about us and our business and how we do things, we get really, really good at something, and then we get super certain about it, and we don't pay attention to the possible threats. Even when it comes to our door and says, "Hey, just warning you, we're going to come after you with new technology that you don't know anything about." Now, they didn't say that in the letter, but it's there. If you remember with the Qualified Champions framework or the Mastery framework, at the very top, the pinnacle of that, is a mindset of flexibility and the mechanics of progress, or not progress, but the mechanics of feedback. You have to be able to follow the feedback, because if we don't follow the feedback, something like this, right? Something like this could happen to you. These guys got cocky. Now, on the upside, I will tell those of you that are actually still paying attention and interested in the history of this, only 3 Confederates died and 1 Union soldier died in the entire 30 hours. So it was really just a constant barragement of fire going back and forth across the river. I don't know necessarily what that speaks to you in your business, but what I will point out and remind everyone that when you get super settled and you get certain that this is just, I don't need to change and everything's great, that might be the very moment when something new comes in and takes everything from you. I know in the real estate business right now, some of you guys are going to get your rear end handed to you because there's people out here with technology that's having conversations with people for them. The agents aren't even doing the conversations. And before you start running off in your head thinking, oh, that's AI, that's terrible, they shouldn't be doing that. Don't you think there was some farmers back in the day who was like, no, I'll stick to my horse while you drive your car? That car is going to break down. It's got rubber tires, right? It's not going to do anything. Guys, the advancement of technology, those people they're going to eat your lunch. So I'm not telling you to disband the strategies. This is a conversation around tactics more than it is strategies. Because strategies are usually timeless. But the tactical things that people are doing to get more business might be the very thing that they're just going to bombard you with and then take your business. And you are just going to be standing there going, oh, here I am. I'm not telling you this to put fear in you. I'm telling you this to pay attention. Because when you start seeing trends and things are working, and that's the true test, by the way, are they getting results? There's only 2 ends of that spectrum when it comes to that qualified champion piece. The qualified, meaning the mechanical side of this. It's either going to be rhetoric, right? People talk a good game. I'm not interested in listening to that. But if they're getting results, you need to pay attention. How are they doing that? I think it's kind of neat I can do this out here because I can actually walk. I can walk at a distance and y'all can still hear me. I can do a little dance. It's a good night. Anyway, guys, I trust all of that was useful for you. Get out and do some dreaming. Change your mindset and give yourself some new experiences. And then don't be Colonel Olmsted when it comes to, we're great. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to change anything because your little fortification could end up in the hands of the enemy. Y'all have a good night. Thanks for being here. You've been very quiet. Not a whole lot of conversation. I'm trying to see if you guys have talked, but I don't think you have. So with that being said, you guys have a fantastic evening. Thank you for being here. Now all of a sudden I'm getting messages in from Dan. Okay. All right. Guys, have a good night, and I appreciate you being here. Hey, by the way, this is not costing you anything, so why don't you share it with a friend? Share the group, Unshakable Secrets. Unshakablegroup.com. All right, guys, y'all have a good night.